Hey everybody, this is Spoonie, and today I want to talk about SpaceCraft. This game was revealed along with a short trailer a couple of weeks ago at the PC Gaming Show and is produced by Shiro Games, who is probably best known for being the developer behind Northgard, but they're also the developer behind War Tales and an upcoming game titled Block Factory, which if you're a fan of factory games, actually looks pretty great. But what seems to be their most ambitious project yet is SpaceCraft, which so far looks and sounds amazing. Although we have pretty limited information, there is an FAQ out, and we are going to read over some of those questions to see what we can learn about the game so far and what inferences we can make based on the information that we have. So before we start, let's talk about this trailer which has been playing in the background behind this intro. It's a really well done trailer, mostly cinematic with some voiceover that gives us a teaser behind the lore of the game. The lore is also elaborated on in the second question of this FAQ, but seeing as it ties into the trailer, I think we'll start with the second question instead of the first. So, what is the setting? In the struggle against the tripods, mankind found a way to escape eradication thanks to the discovery of a mysterious portal leading to a distant part of the universe. You are left stranded, lost, and deprived of what used to be the cradle of humanity. It is now time to rebuild and found a new home. So humanity has escaped some type of hostile alien threat that are being called the tripods, which makes me think of War of the Worlds. And the way the plasma seems to be randomly hurled into space, it also kind of reminds me of Starship Troopers, when they're landing on Klendathu being besieged by those plasma bugs.
It's an ugly planet! A foam planet!
And in order to escape eradication, humanity has discovered a mysterious portal which leads to a distant part of the universe, which sounds a lot like the plot of The Expanse. So we are already seeing some callbacks to other sci-fi favorites, which I don't have a problem with, as long as they answer one big question that I have, which is why aren't the tripods also coming through the portal and following the escaping humans? That might even be a big part of the game, maybe part of the PvE element? Hopefully this gets answered because it will probably bug me a lot if it doesn't. So while I'm glad there's a storyline that sets up the universe, it does sound like a bit more of a reason to walk you through a tutorial than a full-blown campaign, but we'll see. And at the end of the trailer, we see this descriptor, an online galactic frontier, which honestly sounds awesome, and the trailer has me pretty hyped even if we don't see any actual gameplay footage. But after remembering the Kerbal Space Program 2 trailer, which compared to the actual gameplay just didn't line up, I will hold off on being too enthusiastic until we see some actual in-game footage. But okay, enough preamble, let's get into the meat of the FAQ. So what is SpaceCraft? SpaceCraft is an online space exploration and building game. Roam free in a vast galaxy, move seamlessly from systems to planets in order to discover and mine resources, establish yourself, improve your base, and optimize your experience by building new advanced parts for your ships. Create corporations with friends and start trading with other players. Travel, discover, and talk to NPCs to uncover the secrets of a story-rich world. Choose your gameplay in a persistent universe. Okay, so now I'm going to go through these without reading ahead. That way I can share my thoughts as they come up, but that also means that some of my questions may be answered somewhere later in the video as we keep reading, so bear with me. Firstly, I love the idea of a Factorio meets Space Engineer meets No Man's Sky with a bit of Eve sprinkled in, and I'm really curious about the persistent universe bit. And I'm also wondering if it will be done like Eve, where there's different sectors and systems which are instanced, but anybody playing the game can come and go as they wish. Or if it will be more like Space Engineers with entirely separate servers that are then linked by a persistent marketplace. Also, does this mean that planets are procedural in some way? If not, how many planets and systems are there? I think we're going to have to wait and see on those questions, but either way, I love the idea of being able to specialize my production based on market demands and fluctuations, although I do have concerns about my factories being griefed. So I'm glad that the next question speaks on that a little bit, which is SpaceCraft going to be a PvP or PvE focused game? Maybe both. The game is primarily crafting and production oriented. We would like players to cooperate with one another. Forming groups of players will impact your productivity and your ability to rise above your competition. There will also be some PvE combat elements against the fauna populating the various planets. Encounters with space pirates will also force you to engage in space combat. As far as PvP encounters, the game will not be highly PvP focused, but will revolve more around player cooperation and indirect economic competition. That said, it is an aspect that we will adjust as the development progresses. So from this we can glean a couple of things. Firstly, it answers a question that wasn't asked yet, which is this an MMO? Obviously yes, there is at the very minimum a persistent marketplace. This doesn't directly answer my earlier question about having our factories griefed, or if we will all be in the same universe at the same time a la No Man's Sky, or if it will be similar to Space Engineers with a marketplace just tying everything together. I think I might personally prefer the latter. A Space Engineers style game that is as complicated as Factorio with some more exploration elements and automation, all tied together with a global marketplace, just sounds really fun to me. The amount of PvP focus we are going to see also sounds at least somewhat dependent on community feedback. At least that's how I'm interpreting this. I think this sort of game where planet-side mining and refining operations are being automated even when you're off-world and offline would have to be either so immense in scale that there are so many people with so many planets that the likelihood of your facilities being found is basically zero, or the number of people have to be limited, or the amount of PvP has to be restricted in some way. Don't get me wrong, I am all for a full loot factory space sim, but the developers have already said that they prefer there to be more focus on cooperation than on PvP, so with the marketplace and blueprints being a thing, I am assuming PvP will be limited. I think Starbase did a nice job with PvP being restricted near player hubs, but otherwise it was allowed. It worked because space was so vast that it was really unlikely you'd find somebody else, and even if you did, it was possible for them to escape depending on what type of ship they had and how loaded down they were, so it'll be really interesting to see how they balance this and implement PvP. But is it a live service game? At Shiro, we have also provided longtime support for our titles. For SpaceCraft, we are also planning to release multiple updates per year, but not necessarily weekly or monthly updates, like most live service games. Instead, the SpaceCraft universe is being built to support constant evolution influenced by players. So no, it's not a live service game like we're used to seeing, with seasons or battle passes or other types of regular changes. But what I'm taking from this is that we're going to see a structure a bit more like EVE, in that there will be large changes made from time to time that are influenced by what is happening within the game. Which leads into the next question, to which other titles is SpaceCraft similar? SpaceCraft is a unique title, but of course you will see some similarities with other titles like Elite Dangerous, Satisfactory, Space Engineers, EVE Online, Star Citizen, among others. This one is pretty self-explanatory, but Space Engineers being mentioned here is awesome because my favorite part of games like this is often the ship construction, and I'm really excited to see more on that. Is SpaceCraft playable in first-person or third-person perspective? A bit of both actually. As a character, you will be able to play in first person within buildings and while on the planet's surface. At the moment, while flying around in your spaceship, the camera will be in third person only. But we have seen a lot of demand for first person cockpit views, so it's still an open question for the time being. On this, I don't really have a strong preference, but if we see ships needing crews to be flown like some of the larger ships in other games, I would prefer it to be first person so that the other crew roles have a more meaningful feel. Again, I don't have a strong opinion on this one. So what does MMO mean for SpaceCraft? While SpaceCraft is an online multiplayer game, it is not a traditional MMO. We would rather avoid being defined as an MMO. Our goal is to offer an online experience where you will be able to create your ship, your base, and thrive alone or in groups against other players or groups of players. There will be places to meet other players, and you will encounter other people in space or on planets. The game will also be enjoyable and viable as a solo player who just want to discover new areas and create their own base wherever they want. We want SpaceCraft to be a seamless, persistent experience. Alright, so this answers a few of my previous questions in a way that I find really satisfying, because while I plan to play in a group, I also love the option of going off and doing my own thing as a solo player and having that be an actual viable option. I also don't want 100% of everything I produce to be shared with everybody that I'm playing with, so having the ability to go off and have some secret production facilities away from the others that I'm playing with also intrigues me. Does the game need to be online? Yes, this is a multiplayer game, and we made sure that while the game is very fun with other players, it can also be fully played alone. It is a persistent universe where your factories are producing while you're offline and market prices change. So if our factories are producing while we're offline, that means it will probably not be private-ish servers like Space Engineers and will probably be something closer to No Man's Sky. I wonder how factories that have been abandoned by players who have left the game will be handled. Maybe there has to be some form of upkeep in order to keep the universe from being saturated by the player base's natural turnover? We'll see. How is the server infrastructure going to work? Will I be able to host a local dedicated server? The whole game will be hosted on official servers, and while we appreciate the interest of the flexibility offered by privately owned servers, major features of the game and the experience wouldn't be functional. We are aiming to support several thousand players per server. At the moment, our system doesn't allow the creation of private dedicated servers, but we've seen a lot of demand for this feature. Okay, so there you have it. It definitely won't be servers like Space Engineers or Minecraft or anything like that, but rather a number of official servers. So now I'm curious if the marketplace is server specific or if it carries over and is intertwined between servers. I think we can make a few inferences here that the marketplace does in fact persist between official servers, because if it didn't and it was server specific, it wouldn't necessarily preclude private servers. The reason it sounds like private servers may be an issue is because there are some mechanisms tying the official servers together. So that's awesome. Will it be possible to play with a controller or other peripherals? At the moment, our team is focused on creating a comprehensive control scheme tailored to the various gameplay elements of the PC audience. Controller support poses quite a number of challenges and is unlikely to be available at the early stages of the development. So this isn't uncommon. Typically, especially from studios without massive resources, controller support comes much later. This game may also be a bit too complex to play with a controller, kind of like Factorio. I know that now, after many years, you can finally play Factorio with a controller, but I still personally wouldn't want to. So this is a non-issue for me. When can we expect actual gameplay? Our goal is to have a private alpha in the first half of 2025, but of course we will still have a lot of work to do. We want to make sure that the first hands-on experience is enjoyable with several systems in place and that the game looks good. So this sounds like maybe early access can be expected in the second half of 2025 if things go well. Considering the game just announced officially a couple of weeks ago, that's not that terrible of a wait time. I'm hoping that the private alpha period doesn't have an NDA that's too strict so that we can get a few glimpses of actual gameplay. Could we be more accurate than 2025? There is still a lot of work to be done. We will continue assessing our progress and evaluate what would be the ideal date for the early access. The main goal remains to have an early access phase in 2025, probably in the second half of the year. Okay, so exactly what was alluded to in the previous question, with a full early access period planned for the second half of 2025. This sounds like a complicated game with a lot of moving parts, so it wouldn't be all that shocking if we saw delays, although I really hope they are able to stick to this timetable. Does Shiro Games plan to release SpaceCraft on consoles? If yes, which ones? We do not plan on releasing SpaceCraft on consoles for the time being. Our team is focused on delivering a playable PC version of the game at the moment. We also want to keep our options open. We will reassess based on player demand. This kind of falls under controller support for me. I could see a game like this being difficult to port over to consoles, but for those who prefer to play games on console or are hoping to play this on the go with Steam Deck or other handhelds, I hope it works out for everybody. And the final question, what languages will be supported? SpaceCraft is going to be available in the following languages upon early access launch: English, French, Spanish, German, Russian, simplified Chinese, Portuguese, and Polish. Additional languages may be added in later stages of the development process and based on the needs of the project. This is also something that the community is pretty good at adding in themselves, assuming there is some level of mod support, although now that I mention it, there probably won't be mod support if there are no private servers, so never mind. And that's it for the FAQ. This is in my top games that I am waiting for in 2025, and I really hope that I get a chance to play this before the end of the year. I will continue making videos on the progress of this game along with several others, so if you want to stay up to date on gaming news and developments, be sure to subscribe for more. I also release weekly videos that go over the best deals on Steam for that week. If you don't subscribe but would still like to help my channel or raise awareness for this game, hit that like button so that YouTube's algorithm knows this is a game people are interested in. Thanks for watching.